Welcome to this interview series where we explore the beauty of chiropractic and how it can inspire each of us to live a more magnificent life. I'm Nimrod Weiner. I'm speaking with leaders on how to help you live a deeply examined life, exploring authentic leadership and inspiring you through something truly worth emulating, living a greater life of integrity. My hope is that this brings about not only greater self-esteem and self-confidence, but also a sense of belonging, self-worth, and self-actualization, not only for you, but also for those around you. And that the truth of the chiropractic paradigm, its magnificence, its awesomeness, its joy and beauty, put into practice, leads you to a more magnificent life and creates massive impact on the community around you and in this beautiful world of ours. I truly hope that through these interviews you gain richness, wise decision-making, authenticity, you find joy and fun. Thank you very much for listening. I truly hope that it's a great joy for you. Today I had the absolute pleasure of speaking with Mark Postles, a true leader in chiropractic. Mark has been a leader and an inspiration to many chiropractors and to many people going to study chiropractic. He's making a massive difference in the world. He's shared his truth about what it is that a chiropractor can do to have a greater impact in their community by being a more authentic leader, by making more wise decisions of leadership, and as well as that, by bringing to life the principles of chiropractic and how their awe and magnificence has changed his life in massive ways. Mark is one of those authentic leaders that really leads from the heart and has congruency and integrity as a result of allowing those heart-based values to run through his entire life. In this interview, he discusses that process and how you can apply that to every part of your life and practice, as well as the challenges that he has had and continues to have with them. I hope you enjoy this interview with Mark Postles. Welcome today to Mark Postles, a brilliant, inspiring leader within the profession who shows the way in many ways and has done so for me for many, many years. We're here today to discuss some of the ways that the lessons and learnings and wisdom that you've gained over the years has transformed your life and also ways that it can be powerfully impacted to transform the lives of other chiropractors, to live a life of making more wise decisions, living with greater integrity, and seeing the principles of chiropractic come to life. So thank you very much, Mark, for being on this interview.
Oh, you're welcome, Nimrod. My pleasure.
I know a lot about your history, but perhaps for people who don't, one of the most interesting things I think about the way that you came into chiropractic is that it was a philosophical, a paradigm, inspirational motivation for you to move into this wonderful field of ours. So perhaps you can share a brief recount of that story.
Okay. Goes back a few years. As a high school student, having an interest in health and people and a fascination with what made people tick, I searched around for options, and medicine certainly wasn't it, and physio wasn't it, and mainly because they couldn't explain why they did what they did. There was sort of like, oh well, we're just here to sort of help people, and it's like, okay, but what, why? And so I travelled. I went overseas and hitched around the world, and ended up hooking up with a couple of guys who one night just told me about chiropractic, and oh my God, that's it. I've never heard of it before, but that's amazing. That just fills all those missing gaps. So the journey began to get into chiropractic college, which took a couple of years. By the time I gathered the money and the necessary entries and so forth to get to the States to go to school. So arriving at college, Palmer College, in 1972 without having ever been adjusted, but I knew that was right. I knew there was a principle there that was self-evident, and it just made so much sense. It was simple, it was logical, and that was what got me in.
And even that story in itself brings about so many very interesting questions. Maybe to start off with, what was it about the chiropractic principles back then that fired you up?
Well, so it was self-evident that there is this universal force that brings everything together, and there's a consciousness that we're bathed in that gives matter its form and its properties. And so to me it was like, well, yeah. And so there's this drive that's for order, and in fact everything's in order. And if there's any disorder, disconnection with that, then we'll be less than what we could be. So really it's just a matter of removing those interferences wherever we can to allow that perfection to come through. And in the meantime, embracing the paradox of the order and disorder. So that was, it was sort of a bit of a spin at, in your early 20s. It's a bit hard to get around that. But at least, I think I was exposed to that. So that was so, I'm so grateful for that, because I don't know whether students get exposed to that sort of level of thinking and their entry into the profession nowadays.
And so going off that, how important do you think it is that we are inspired by the principles themselves on a daily basis or a regular basis?
Well, I guess it's, you cannot not be. It's just how life is. Life is an expression of this consciousness that we get to play in, and so that's totally inspirational. The whole, every aspect of it, the good and the bad. So I can't see how we cannot be inspired, or how I cannot be inspired by life.
Have there been times when, for yourself, you've noticed that you've deviated away from that inspiration and realised the gap as a result?
Oh, always. I mean, constantly. It's a constant reminder of, there's this. I think there's a dynamic between the physical particle realm of solidified matter and the essence that we are, and that wave form. And we sort of come and go, but we're living a physical life. So but we're physical beings in this physical body and this physical existence, which is all machinery. And then with this, we've grabbed this body and we're playing this game from a spirit form, or from a consciousness form. So we have access to that, and we have also access to being physical, which is really cool, because as long as we don't get stuck in either, if we just get stuck in spirit, then we become ungrounded in our body, and if we get stuck in our body, we become lost in our spirit. So so I think it's a combination of it.
I was listening to a Bruce Lipton interview that where he was saying he made the realization that our physical body allows our spirit to know what chocolate tastes like, or what falling in love tastes like. And again, there was so much depth in what you've just scanned over there. Maybe moving into that interesting question of how the physical and the spiritual connect, what would you say is one of your higher metaphysical values or beliefs in life?
Probably the unity of those polarities, the unity of spirit and matter, the unity of the polarities within life, from the left wing and the right wing, from the various factions of ideology and culture. That when we get at a big enough viewpoint on it, a bigger perspective on it, we see the oneness of it, and I think it was some of those defining moments of the first voyages to space, and looking back on the Earth, and just seeing the magnificence of that perfection of this little blue planet, and that we're all on it, and we're just a bunch of people riding the spaceship, and and we come in and leave from it, and then we make up all these games of difference and distinction, but we're really, when it comes down to it, either at the micro level or the macro level, we are all one. We're all joined. We're all cells in humanity. So it's not. I think that's that premise, that ability to go from the small to the big and back again, and see the hugeness in the small, and the bigness in the little, and the bigness in the big.
Yeah, absolutely. It's repeating structures, isn't it? And it's wisdom and lessons everywhere. What specifically about that excites you and invigorates you? What gets you in your gut and your heart in terms of that metaphysical premise?
I think it's a humbleness. It's a feeling of wonder and curiosity. It's a in my physical being, in my physical, the way I've got my physical stuff wired up, I will see right and wrong. I'll see good and bad. I'll see, things that should and shouldn't, and so forth. And I think that, the really valuable part for me is the recognition of that I'm doing judgment on this, or I'm having an opinion on this, which is my evaluation of someone or something that may or may not necessarily be true in their experience, or that in another reality sort of thing. So I think it just takes one into a state of reverence, and maybe in many cases it's just fleeting, but it's those fleeting moments that are just ahas, and so I savor those, and they can come whenever they do, driving along or adjusting someone or in a conversation, and it's just like, oh my God, this is a much bigger perspective than it appears.
Yeah. And how do you think? What do you think are some of the trappings of that? What do you think would be some of the challenges? How do we notice that we're going away from that moment of magnificence and aha?
Yeah, I think an attitude of curiosity is really valuable. And what probably keeps me on track on that one is sort of a statement I've made to myself, like, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Or fascinating, so something that I might normally put a judgment on. If I say to myself, oh, that's the difference between the noise of the city and the noise of the country.
Yeah, that's right. It's non-stop in Sydney.
Yeah, there's a lot of bird noise in the morning. So it's just that statement about, wow, isn't this fascinating? Oh, isn't this interesting? Wasn't this interesting that I'm reacting to the situation? So, isn't this interesting that my opinion is coming over really strongly here, and maybe blocking out someone else's opinion or whatever. So, I think that, become the observer of self, so that we get to see, or I get to see, myself behaving in a certain way, and on a given situation. And from an observer point of view, then there's many more distinctions available.
Mm-hmm. And so taking it from that detail of theoretical to application, where do you apply that in your life as a chiropractor, in your family?
Mm-hmm. Well, like as a chiropractor, people will come in and they have their story, and their story can be quite interesting. Yeah. And their history, by which, most of us, I think, run by our history rather than by our present or by our desired future. And so the history becomes the label, becomes the identity. And, the question always has to be, well, was that useful? And in many cases, it's not, and the person who comes in seeking care, maybe in the initial phases, may have some very unuseful behaviours or history around giving them behaviours, and so that's a 3:49.
Yeah, that's right.
Tram getting to the city. Yeah. So those unuseful behaviours then have to be seen as interesting, because it's useful to see them as interesting, because if we see them as good or bad, and particularly bad, there's a lack of growth available for that person. So I would see, having that perspective of, wow, isn't this fascinating? They're doing this behaviour and they're getting this outcome. And, I wonder if there's other options for this person that they may like to try on. Now, when we're entrenched in a behaviour over time, it's become our identity. That sort of change is a bit slow to be accepted. So, in many cases, sometimes it's instant, but very rarely. So I think, from a practical point of view, it's about sitting with the person. It's not, like I know a lot of chiropractors want to sort of tell the chiropractic story and let people know that what they've got to do and how they've got to do it and how long they've got to do it and all the rest of it. I see it that, look, we're joining a partnership with people and we're going to be with them for the rest of our life or their life or however long it may be. And, if that's an opportunity, and it may not be, but let's just look at a graduated approach to this. It's like any relationship. You just don't dive in and, it's not all about me on the first visit. It's fact finding. We, over the first period of time, we're sort of getting to know that person and the way they vibrate. The baggage they've got, the baggage we've got, the dynamics of an interpersonal relationship. So, and it doesn't necessarily have to take years. It can.
Yeah. Do you think that some of the reason that chiropractors may want to dump everything on the first visit is they feel they need to save people, save their lives, change them immediately, give them an outside-in quick fix?
Yeah, I think it really comes back to, is the perfection of the universe such that it makes any junk at all? In other words, is there really anything to fix?
Yeah.
And I would say no. Yeah. I'd say, the person is in a subluxated state, and that's perfect for that person right now. Mm-hmm. That's the way that the perfection of their life is that, and it's played out, is that they are subluxated for a particular reason right at this point in time. And we're not even there to take those subluxations away. That's a practice of medicine. That's a therapeutic approach. We're there to facilitate with their body and their life expression a better comprehension of themselves. And with that, the subluxation may well be one of the things that clears out. So, to have this sort of thing that, this person's clear, this person's free of subluxations, that's bullshit as far as I'm concerned. Because we're alive, we're human beings, we're in this physical world in a very, aberrant form of consciousness. And of course there'll be lack of comprehension with who we are. Maybe, the moment we transcend, we have total comprehension with who we are. Yeah. And then we don't need a body. Yeah. So, so I think, that process of life is, life is subluxation, if you like. If subluxation was to be a disconnect from who we really are.
So are you suggesting that the objective of chiropractic for you is more than just bringing about the adjustment of the subluxations?
Well, I'd see it as a huge respect for the subluxation as a metaphor and as an entity. And I think, we're dealing with the physical world, so we've got to be bloody good at physical stuff, So we've got to make sure that our techniques and our skills are working with the body to facilitate the body clearing out subluxation where it can.
Yep.
So I think, there's no question about that. There's not an abrogation of responsibility there. We are technicians at that level, and we bring our consciousness to it and our intent and so forth, and that's at that other dimension, that other realm. But we're still doing a physical task, and it has to be done well. It can't just be just whack them in the backside with a shovel, or just hit them with a flying sevens. It just does not. It doesn't cut it in terms of our integrity as practitioners.
So you just brought up a very interesting word, integrity, and I know that a lot of the work that you do is about helping people realize how to bring about more integrity in their life. And for me, one of the greatest lessons that I've learned from you that I apply again and again is the model that you have for having a look at integrity. So maybe can you delve into that as a way that we can apply that in every arena of our life on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the evolution of what I call the integrity model, and is now known as the innate model, took place over many, many years of coaching and obviously of practice and working with lots of associates and so forth in our practices. That when we look at the way we express as a human being, we have a certain persona, we have a certain behavioral style, we have a certain sort of personality trait, and or we tend to do them. And there's been many attempts over many, many years to archetype them, to typify them, to put them into some sort of classification, and they always seem to be coming back to groups of four. And so I started going through, went right back to Plato and Aristotle and all the way through there, looking at about over 200 of them, and recognized that there was a pattern that no one was really nailing from a neurological perspective, and that was that these archetypes are expressions of certain parts of our brain. And so the innate model is a development of that, just simply saying, look, certain parts of the brain have certain functions, and if we have a bias towards that function, be it with our history, our culture, our experiential perceptions of life, then we tend to fire in certain areas more than others. So that then has had some ramifications that have developed based on that, because human beings as individuals have a certain way of seeing the world, and therefore their personality and behavioral preferences and so forth. So that's typified within the innate model. And then groups of human beings do the same. So a group actually acts like one brain, and this is where that you start to see how the unity of individuals is there. There's nothing missing. It's like where anyone who knows who's got a group of individuals and one of the members go away for a day or two, there will be a shift of the rest of the individuals to accommodate for that person who's just gone. And it's not structured,
Yep.
It's not a structured, organized left brain thing that does that. It's a dynamic that happens within people. They just shift. One child goes away, does a sleepover, and the other kids all reassemble their PowerPoints to accommodate. So seeing that in organizations, and being one of my big things is to support others to do what they can do for themselves, and part of that is in seeding
peak hour traffic in Sydney.
Wow, is seeding the education system with chirocentric viewpoint. So we had been sitting on a board of the New Zealand College and now on the Australian College. There's an opportunity there to start to see, and over the last 16 years as a board member of the New Zealand College, to see the way in which that integrated approach of left and right brain from the innate model perspective not only functions really well at a individual level, a partnership level, a board level, it also operates from a college level too. So any group of people is actually a vitalistically driven entity, and we think of it from a chiropractic viewpoint rather than a mechanistic viewpoint. When you look at boards, you look at organisations, corporations, you'll see very few of them do it vitalistically. Most of them do it mechanistically, and they're left brain driven, structured, procedurally, content oriented phenomena. So this is evolving. We're actually releasing another book in a couple of weeks' time on education. So it's for the innate model educator, and this is the next step is to bring this thinking then into low levels of education. And because we've already on our testing of it, seen huge changes with classroom management and with kids and teacher, stress levels dropping and all the rest of it, because they're now seeing it as an integrated whole, and they can start to play off the previously so-called troublemakers, and they're actually leaders, but they just call them troublemakers. But and so starting to create a new dynamic in a group of children. So my hope is that will filter through into other areas of higher education. And in New Zealand, we've got a model that reflects that quite strongly now. So so there's I guess for me the chiropractic message is a very simple message. It's a message of integrity, which is being complete and whole, and that all parts are necessary, all parts are valuable, they all contribute. The question is, how does that flow? What's the relationship between left brain, right brain, front brain, behind brain, all that sort of thing. So and there's a certain system that follows at all times. So I'd like to see that going through into society, not necessarily as chiropractic per se, but the chiropractic essence there, which then starts people resonating with that respect for each other and themselves and nature and the position that we have in this form, this life form. So
So perhaps applying that to a practical level, whether it is some of the chiropractors applying it into practice or as a family member or whichever way you want to exemplify it, what would you say are some of the pain points chiropractors may have and some of the ways they may see that they're out of integrity and then could apply this model in a way to bring about greater congruency and integrity and completeness and whole for them?
Okay. Well, there's four essential components I would suggest to this. Well, to a quadrant model, obviously there's four, and so the driver has to be, why am I doing this? Like, what's my philosophy? What's my purpose? What's my rationale for this activity? So, if it's in the case of chiropractic, then why am I a chiropractor? What's my purpose for being a chiropractor, and what is my purpose for adjusting? What's the rationale here for doing what we do? Likewise for the team, for associates and other team members, you've got to know the founding cultural why. So that's something that a lot of chiropractors have been gravitating away from in more recent times. In fact, many institutions will poo-poo it, which is quite weird because then they also have a department of philosophy in the same university. But anyway, I don't get that. But anyway, so it seemed like science and philosophy can't coexist, which is total bullshit.
Yeah.
So anyway, so then the second is the science. Our premises have to be tested, and science is that area of curiosity. It's that area of finding out, well, this is working, but why is it working so well, or why is it not working? Why, let's test it. So it should be observing what is and then testing to see what is so about that and give some explanation for the components of it. So be that the individual with a given technique, with a given person, there's an outcome, but then the testing of it is critical. We've got to get our epistemology right. So, and this is where science, particularly in chiropractic, is so off, because it's not looking at what is in the field, the results that people are getting, and then asking the question, well, that's really fascinating. How is that? How are we, what's bringing all this about? Why do people keep going back to these guys and getting these changes? And, these cases seem to be, showing shift and so forth. Science is trying to drive the profession from its own philosophy, which has been undeclared. Yep. So I think, you cannot not have a philosophy. It's simply what's the declaration of that. So yep. how have you identified it? So then the next level is to the third point would be to have something practical and something that you can apply to that flow of your philosophical premise and your scientific understanding. So in chiropractic, we talk about the philosophy, the science, and the art, and it should be in that order. The art is the expression, the technical expression, communication of the ideas, the communication of the science, making sure that it's all consistent when we're working with a person. So the incongruencies are cleared out of one's practice. We are there for a purpose. We have evidence to support that, and we do our outcome measures based on the objectives. We make adjustments if needs be to our application to make that all squeaky clean. The area that we miss out on mostly in chiropractic is the fourth quadrant, and that is one of political expression. It's one of having the balls. It's a testosterone-driven thing, so it's like all gonadal-driven thing, because it's about having the guts to get out there and say it as it is. Take a stand, put a flag in the sand, and say, look, this is our position. Because to profess is the root of profession, and we must be willing to profess. And what tends to happen is that chiropractors tend to, because they're into helping and healing and touching and feeling, that's all that quadrant 3 stuff that we just spoke about in terms of technique and so forth, and they're withdrawing into that. And not being willing to go out there and to say it as it is, to be willing to be shot at. And, you well know the feeling of that. It's not pleasant. And at the same time, it sends ripples of change throughout society. So, the shakers and movers of history have all had a good respect for and application of that political expression. So those would be the four, having the philosophy, the science, the art, and the politics. And so, in New Zealand College, for example, we spend time in the fourth year. We've got 4 years. So the first year is around philosophy, the next year is around science, the next year is around honing their technique, and the fourth year is about becoming commercially real and being able to go out and do screenings and do public talks and express in the front of the classroom various viewpoints and so forth.
So for a chiropractor in the field who perhaps does ascribe to the general principles of chiropractic and loves what they teach us, where do you think they could see signs and symptoms of the fact that they're out of integrity, or that they don't have all of those quadrants really unified in a good, flowing, congruent way?
Oh, gee. Well, I mean, it's interesting because we all have preferences, and as I mentioned before about, our past really determines who we are. That's our baggage, and that's our reference point. So we step to that tune. Like with the Innate Model, for example, we have a free questionnaire online there where you can go in and do 60 questions, and you'll come up with some of your preferences. So that's at the innate model.com. And that gives an idea to the individual about, okay, well, I'm firing really strongly out of these. Yeah, I'm firing really strongly out of these particular areas of my brain. So these are my preferences. So the question then is, well, do you change that to be something else, or do you manage for it? Like how do you do that? So I wouldn't suggest that a person who's the epitome of the caring, supporting, kinesthetic healer to go out and start lambasting the government and doing provocative things, because there's not the neurological equipment there within that person to do that. Mm-hmm. However, recognizing it, and it's like in your team, in your office, if you have a gap there, and I would suggest the whole practice does it on a regular basis, or at least once a year, that if you have a gap there, what do? Well, you hire someone for that position, so who fills that gap. So because we're all part of one, so you don't expect a liver cell to do the job of a heart cell.
Yep.
And you don't get a heart cell to do the job of a kidney cell. It's that we're great at what we do, and we're all part of a whole. So let's give away the idea that we have to do everything, have to be everything. And I think this is one thing that chiropractors still have to learn, to a large degree. Because they tend to build their practices around themselves. Even if they've got an associate practice, it's still about them, the principal, and then the associate sort of does stuff on the side, and they sort of work for me type thing. So it's not a business as such. So I would see it that if you felt like you're really strong in an area and one area is really not a high priority or very low priority, then how can you manage for that? And that might mean, because of your exquisite clinical application, you take money on a regular basis and you give it to those people who are willing to do that sort of thing. So that means, and I've always done this. I mean, Jackie and I have tithed throughout our life, and it makes a big difference. You can then give lots of money to organisations that then go and do the work that you are either not willing or not equipped to do. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's about everyone doing everything within those four quadrants. It's about celebrating what we have within those quadrants. And the interesting thing about that, when we celebrate and we're grateful for what we have, we get more.
Yeah.
And so, you can't lose.
And perhaps interestingly, parallel to, finding subluxations and bringing about a change with adjusting them, in a more global scale, when we look at the innate model, it's about finding where those interferences are, where your lack may be, that disconnects you from your whole self, and bringing about energy to change that system and shift it around.
Yeah. Well, and people look at what's missing. They look at what's not working, and if we can direct their attention to what is working, it changes their physiology. It immediately. It's like, I guess probably the bottom line is, we step into this body and we have this amazing ability to create, and that thought is the creator. Like we can think things into existence, and science to support that big time now. And I think that's really the critical area here, is if we can allow people to start being grateful for what they do have, all of a sudden stuff that they don't have either becomes less of an issue or not an issue, or it just dissolves and disappears anyway, because that sense of gratitude for what they do have starts to flood through. And this is where contrast is always a very useful thing. Someone thinks they're really hardly done by until they see a contrast with someone who's even worse off, and all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe I'm not that bad, So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So just a couple of questions to finish up. First of all, what do you think is one of the greatest gifts that chiropractic has for humanity, for the world, for the universe, for life?
That nothing's broken, nothing needs to be fixed, the world doesn't need to be changed, that we have it all within us. And, it's about being grateful for what we have and celebrating the moment that we're given and that we've taken, and truly living that, and I guess that, the paradox from that is that then brings forth all sorts of great stuff, I mean, if you, use one of my strategies on this one, I guess, has been if I just talk to like those two students who talked to me when I was searching at age 19 and plant those seeds just one night over a couple of beers in Vancouver, Canada, plant that idea that chiropractic, was an amazing opportunity, and I bought it, and so I became a chiropractor. So, at that point in time, I thought, well, if it benefits just one person, it's all been worthwhile. And that was my mantra, and it still is. It's just that one person you're with. And so from that then, if I could just influence one person to become a chiropractor, then it'd be all worthwhile. Well, at the last count a few years ago, it was over 100.
Yeah.
Now, for me, the strategy around that is that, well, even if those 100 were, only seeing 100 people a week, that's what, 10,000 people a week.
Yeah.
That were able to service. And it was like when it came to the coast here, I said, well, if we could see 1,000 people a week, that'd be really cool. But I didn't want to see 1,000 people a week, so I set up a few offices, and that then became the reality, and we're servicing well over that. So, and now we've got a few chiros in an office. So, we're heading for that within the office. You know what I mean? So it's about leverage. I think that's probably one of the greatest forces that we have. I think, some pretty wise people in the past have said that. There was an Archimedes or something, that give me a rod long enough, I'll move the world sort of thing. So, but, leverage is a very, very powerful thing. And it's something that we can use for our own benefit, and for the benefit of humanity. And, there's no reason why chiropractors can't be enjoying, 7-figure practices and having, 8-figure investments, portfolios, and driving nice cars, and at the same time having the essence of that magnificent and simple viewpoint that chiropractic is, surging through their veins. It's so cool because it's just, it's not this or that. It's you can have it all.
So bring it all back together into that integrated model. What's the legacy that you're working on for yourself, Mark?
Well, as I said, the leverage effect of within the chiropractic profession is one of those. Now, I could extend that on because, by being one of the drivers of a college that's now taking in, we've capped it for 75 people a year in New Zealand, and we'll start the same sort of process in Australia. You've got 75 coming out every year. So the same sort of magnitudes can happen there. If you can have influence there, then they get out into practice, and so much, the profession is so much stronger because of that, particularly if they're being geared towards being leaders within the profession. And that's what's been happening. I've been taking on leadership roles. So at that level, that's fine. As I mentioned before, we're a little microcosm really within chiropractic, and we've been contained mainly by ourselves, but maybe some help from outside. But so we have this little club that we have, and we're guardians into this trust, and if chiropractic gets its name changed, it doesn't really matter because it's you can't take away the tick. So that may well happen. Who knows? But I that's why we're sort of moving more now towards taking that tick essence, that vitalistically engaged mechanism. So it's true. It's vitalism and mechanism together. It's not mechanistic or vitalistic.
Yeah.
It's bullshit to say it's a vitalistic
Yeah.
organisation, because you've got to have some mechanism there. Otherwise, it's sort of just hot air. So so you've got to have the two integrated. And taking that now into strategically into firstly education, because that forms the backbone of our society here and globally. And so that's a long-term view in terms of developing the education system, and then looking at the outflows from that, which is business, corporate, and empowering individuals and so forth. So there's lots of streams that come off that, but we've called the book Generation Failure, and it's based on the fact that we have failed this generation, and we're trying to fit an old model into a new paradigm, and it's just not working, and we're not preparing students for the world that they're going to be stepping into. So that's the essence of that. So and I think probably no matter, I like to get leverage, but at the same time, love to connect with people very closely. So we have smallish groups who get together and go drilling down on certain things. And we've got a program called The Missing Link, which is coming up in a couple of weeks' time on the Sunshine Coast and over in Perth at the end of October. And that's geared to looking at what it is that you really want, and getting really clear on that, and taking yourself out of your body to do that. So really looking at how powerful thought is, and at the same time, where's your handbrakes? What are the beliefs and the personal laws and the stories that you tell about yourself that are not true? They're these ideas that we have that limit us and keep us back to this so-called identity that we've been told that we have to have. So, looking at that dynamic and allowing people to get cognition and new awareness on it and make some new decisions and new behaviours around it. So that's the 6th through the 8th up on the Sunshine Coast, and 27th through the 29th over in Perth, so in October. So it'd be great if that's get tagged to anyone who wants to come to that. That'd be fantastic. And if not, that's the method of our coaching anyway. Our coaching is more geared towards empowering the individual. It's not so much process and procedure and all the scripts and all that sort of stuff. It's more about, well, for what purpose, and what is your truth, and what is your reality, and what's your evidence for that, and so working at a probably more personal level. So which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. And as a testimonial for myself, I've done a lot of work with you over many years, and I could not imagine a more well-fitted, tailored program that has transformed me in many ways. So apart from giving you a plug, I really wanted to show my gratitude and thank you for that. So it's a lot of amazing content in there, and a lot for chiropractors to drill down. Maybe just one last question. What do you think is a powerful question you think chiropractors should really ask themselves?
I wouldn't actually ask a question on that one. I would just make a declarative. I would just say thank you.
Yep. Beautiful. All right. Well, on that point, thank you for sharing your wisdom, for helping us make wiser decisions and living a life of greater integrity, so that we can really see the chiropractic principles come to life, as they so much have for you and for every person you've touched in many, many ways. I'm sure your legacy will come to life. So thank you for your time, Mark, and for your wisdom.
You're welcome, Nimrod. My pleasure.
Thanks.
Take care. See ya.